Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2018 crime drama Dragged Across Concrete. Uh, this is another request for Lawrence. I want to give him a special shout out for requesting this review. And if there is a film, a TV show, or a topic you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, Dragged Across Concrete is not what I would call one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's got some merits. The direction, when it's not lollygagging around or wasting time with long, dragged out sequences that have no business being as long as they are, like Vince Vaughn eating a fucking sandwich for what feels like an eternity, the direction is pretty good. I would say the story, there are some elements of it that are interesting, especially when it comes to some of the characters and their motivations, some of the mystery, at least early on. And it's got some good performances, some solid performances by the cast. I can't really say that this film has any bad acting. I think everyone involved here does a really good job with what they have to work with. But because it's an ensemble film and it has a lot of characters, not all of them are able to be as fleshed out or as deep as others. So you have a lot of instances where it feels like certain actors are honestly pretty wasted here. Because they are given roles where it seems like there's a lot to do, like for instance with Vince Vaughn's character, but when you break it down, it really isn't much. And it definitely is the case when it comes to Michael Jai White, for instance, and a few of the other characters, like Tory Kittles' character, Henry Johns, who's supposed to be one of these main big characters, but you can really break down most of his character and most of the scenes that he's in to, at least in terms of sequences that give him a lot to do, down to like 3 or 4 sequences. So it's not really that much. And Jennifer Carpenter, for instance, she's in it for very little. So yeah, there's a lot of actors and actresses in this, and they deliver pretty solid performances across the board. But other than really Mel Gibson, and I guess maybe Tory Kittles, and maybe Vince Vaughn, the rest of the cast isn't really on the screen enough to really leave that much of an impact. And it's just one of those movies that at the end of the day, to me personally, it was too slow. At times, this film was so tedious and so slow moving and so painful to watch because it was taking the scenic route when it comes to getting the story moving along or moving things forward, that it felt like I was being dragged across concrete. And that's not what you want. You don't want a concrete leaden plot and narrative. And that's really what happened with this movie. Because S. Craig Zahler is a talented filmmaker, but he's one of those filmmakers who also thinks that they are equally as good of a writer as they are a filmmaker, and it's painfully evident at this point that he's at the point where he is firmly entrenched in this belief that he's good, that he's great, that he's golden, that he's really on the same level when it comes to both forms of cinematic storytelling. And to me personally, this film is just evidence that he isn't. But if you're gonna have all of these fucking critics say all this shit and say that it's a engrossing movie that consistently keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's a cop movie masterstroke. And they're gonna blow smoke up his ass and say that Zahler is a master of tension and release, when really he's a master of blue balls, if you ask me, because there really isn't much of a release. But if he's going to keep having that going on, he's never going to think that he needs to improve anything when it comes to his writing and his characters. And he's just going to keep having his head up his own ass and huffing his own farts. So, you're probably wondering, why is this just a review and not a rant? Because, yes, at times it was hard to watch, but it wasn't one of those movies that, like, pissed me off. It didn't make me feel like I wasted the entirety of my time. Uh, there were times where it felt like I was wasting time, but it didn't feel like it was a total waste of time and effort. It's one of those firmly below average, forgettable crime dramas, if you ask me. And the biggest crime is that it wasted really good, solid game performances by Mel Gibson, Vince Vaughn, Tory Kittles. And like I was saying earlier, the direction, it's not really that much of a problem unless the director decides to have sequences that are stretched out to lengths that are not sustainable. And the screenplay, it's another instance of a very simple plot. You have these two cops who get caught on video for being a little too rough with a criminal that they're busting. The video winds up online, so then they end up getting fired and suspended. Well, actually, they aren't fired yet. They get suspended because of the fact that the video leaked and policies are changing and so on. And because of the fact that now that they're suspended, they're not going to have as many options to rise up the ranks in the precinct or in the cop landscape. Mel Gibson's character, who's the one that was doing most of the police brutality or being a little too rough with the suspect, his character Brett and his partner Anthony decide to team up and plan a robbery of this dealer or this criminal in order to set themselves up. Vince Vaughn's character is initially reluctant, but he decides to go along because he respects his partner. Mel Gibson's the one who spearheads this whole thing because his wife has MS and his daughter is getting abused and harassed on the street in the neighborhood where they live. So he wants to move his family out of that neighborhood. And he doesn't really have the money right now to do it, and he's not going to get that money in the future because of the scandal. So he decides, I'm going to steal some money from some scumbag. While this is going on, you have this guy in ski mask and black clothing who's going around robbing and killing people. And also, you have a bit of a subplot that is dealing with this African American ex-convict named Henry, who just got out of prison and wants to do one last job to set himself up and his family for life. So it's the same kind of thing that's going on, but one with a black family and one with a white family. And the movie opens up with Henry. And it opens up in a really awkward, just not very pleasing fashion. And I think that might have been the intent to try to make it be a little more gritty. But you open up with the guy banging some chick and finishing early. And I'm like, what is really the point of this? And the film tries to have some line of dialogue that comes across as pretentious and try hard to make it seem like it really has a point here. But your movie opens up with a guy fucking someone, and I don't really think that that was really necessary. Unless you're trying to do some half-ass bullshit of, oh, yeah, he's fucking someone, and that's what life is. You either fuck people or you're the one that gets fucked. So you're like, okay, what does this ultimately lead to? It leads to a very predictable conclusion. It's all about these two forces, maybe if you want to call it that. Maybe not. Forces is not the right word. You get these two. Uh, these. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. It's kind of hard to really think because of this fucking heat. 115 degrees outside. But yeah, you got these two separate uh characters with similar mindsets and a similar goal, and they all come to a head by the end of the movie. They both are wanting the same thing. And the guy with the mask who's going around doing all this stuff, there really isn't much of a mystery with that character because he's just in on it with the criminals that are trying to do that are doing this big robbery of this gold from a bank. So ultimately, it's about bank robbery. It's about the two different sides of a bank robbery. It's with the getaway driver and his friend, which are played by Kittles and Michael J. White, and then you've got the cops who are deciding to break the law in order to set themselves up because the system is so corrupt and the system is so fucked up that they aren't allowed to make enough money. So they decide that they're gonna steal the money, and it bubbles up and boils uh, to a conclusion where pretty much one side is completely, utterly fucked, and the other side is able to enjoy the majority of the riches. And the only difference here is that the side that wins is the side that normally doesn't win in these kind of films. So instead of it being the corrupt white cops, it's the African American character, the former ex-con, the getaway driver. He's the one that winds up uh, enjoying and having all the riches. And it almost seems like the film is trying to posit all of this as a positive just because he decided to help out Mel Gibson's wife and his kid and give them a little bit of the gold. And it's like, okay, yeah, all right. Maybe he's not a total piece of shit, but he's still an ex-con and he did all this other fucking shady ass shit. He was implicitly involved in a robbery that led to multiple people getting fucking killed. So please don't try to tell me that this is supposed to be some kind of positive uh thing where it's like, oh, he got away, he gamed the system, the black man won. It's like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, this feels really wrong. Because if you think about it, if it was the white guy in that scenario and the black guy got fucked over, if it was two black cops, people would be like, that's racist and that's just wrong and that's all kinds of fucked up. But since the roles are reversed here, it's supposed to be acceptable. I don't I don't get it, because that's what it seems like. That's the kind of impression that I get from the end of this movie, because you have the whole thing where he's got the mansion, and it doesn't really seem like he has any remorse over the people that fucking died in the robbery. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe the whole point is that everyone, black, white, is equally as capable of doing this kind of stuff, and it's wrong on both sides. But it just didn't really come across that way to me. But that's not really the biggest issue that I have with this script. The biggest issue that I have with the screenplay is not really the tone. It's how predictable a lot of things are for a film that's over 2.5 hours. That's really just about a heist. It's about a heist and two sides of the heist. That's really all it is. You could throw in the lines of dialogue, talking about race, talking about politics, talking about whatever the fuck you want to, but at the end of the day, it's still about a heist. It's still about a robbery. It's about people who want the money from the robbery. The robbers, the getaway driver, and the cops who want to rob the robbers. And little bits here and there about the family. But at the end of the day, it's really simple. It doesn't need to be 2.5 hours. This is the kind of plot that you could get done and over with in like 40 minutes in an episode of some crime TV show. And what I'm speaking about in terms of the predictability is that with Vince Vaughn's character, for instance, the only things you really get to know about him in terms of character development are that he's Mel Gibson's partner. He likes egg salad sandwiches, and he likes to take his sweet ass time eating them. And he has a girlfriend that he's thinking about proposing to, but he hasn't had the guts to just yet. But he's going to try to do it over the phone, just in case he doesn't make it. And of course, he doesn't fucking make it. Yeah, see, predictable. You know, as soon as the girlfriend is introduced, and as soon as he's doing the whole thing where I want to propose to her, but I don't know if she's going to say yes, you know that he's going to fucking die. And on top of that, you have this other character, Jennifer Carpenter's character, that's introduced like over an hour into the movie, Kelly. And she's this mother who does not want to be away from her newborn baby and has been missing all of his time at work, and so her husband forces her to go to work, and of course it's the day where the robbers come in and completely ruin her life and her baby's life, and in the process kill her too, because it's obvious. She might as well have a neon glowing sign over her head that says dead woman walking. You know that she's gonna fucking die. And with Mel Gibson's character, you know that because he's so corrupt, because there's lines about him losing his soul, you know that he's gonna fucking die too. So the only real surprise that you get is maybe stuff where you have like the woman that's being taken hostage by the robbers. She winds up doing something desperate. She's the one that kills Vince Vaughn's character. I knew Vince Vaughn's character was going to die, but I didn't necessarily see that coming. So I'll give the screenplay credit for that, for going that far and going that dark with things. And you know the robbers are going to get fucking whacked. You know that's going to happen. You know they're not going to make it. And since the guy, and I pretty much saw Kittles' character Henry surviving too, because the film opens up with him. So it's almost like the film was trying to act like it's his movie at the start, and this is really his story. But then there's like bits here and there with Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn's character and the robbers. But really, at the end of the day, it's really his story, because he opens the film and he ends the film. And if it was meant to be his story, give him more scenes. There's a whole chunk of the movie where he and Michael J. White aren't even in the movie because it's focusing more on Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn's characters and building them up. I hate this fractured storytelling. It feels like you're trying to smash together multiple different short films into one movie. It doesn't really work very well, especially if you're not that good of a writer, like S. Craig Zahler. And speaking of his writing, there are other moments that really cripple this film in terms of its effectiveness, because you have scenes where the film will come to a screeching halt just so characters can bloviate or have some pretentious, unrealistic dialogue. I'm so fucking tired of these so-called gritty, realistic movies that have sequences where characters start talking like they aren't real people. You spend all this time trying to make things look like it's as real as possible and street level and so on. And then you have lines of dialogue that are pretentious as hell and come across as if the writer is trying to write Shakespeare. What are you trying to do here? Are you trying to make a gritty, realistic crime drama with real situations and real people? Or are you trying to have some bullshit where you're going to have some pretentious talk about society? What the fuck are you trying to do? And another thing that bothers me is these fucking critics who give a pass to a film in terms of its poor writing and its poor characterization and the fact that the plot is way too goddamn long because it mentions something about society or current events. Why are we giving passes to that shit just because it's present in the film? Newsflash, critics! It's been decades. We've had decades of films that have mentioned the same things: race, politics, gender, social economic status, socio-political issues, all of these fucking things. Unless you have a new perspective, unless you have a new spin on things, unless you are able to provide something that opens a discussion that I haven't seen before or haven't been a part of in numerous social media posts and YouTube comment sections, I don't fucking want to hear it. Just stick to the fucking plot. I don't give a shit about the politics. I don't care about that. I don't care about opening up the discussion because it's a discussion that I've already been having. And these films have already opened up numerous times. And these critics don't help things because they just give a pass to a film and call it brilliant just because it mentions race and cops being brutal and some of these other things. And I'm aware of those things, but it's to the point now where I don't need a movie to make me aware of those things anymore. So unless you got something really unique in terms of your perspective to provide, in terms of your subtext and your discussions about society, just focus on making an engaging film with engaging characters and an engaging story. Because having scenes where people just talk about these pretentious diatribes about society or aspects of society that suck don't really help. They don't really make the film more interesting. They don't make the film more captivating to me. Because if I want to see how much society sucks, I can turn on the news or I can walk outside my front door. I don't have to spend 2.5 hours watching a crime drama to get that. So, yeah, I guess this really is turning into a rant because I don't like this movie. I don't. It's your typical kind of pretentious windbag drama that's trying to win Oscars, that's way too fucking long, that has so many scenes that have no business either being in the movie or are just way too stretched out to the point where they shatter. And I know there are people who like these kind of movies, and that's fine, teach their own. But I just don't see the appeal of these slow burn thrillers that never really get anywhere. By the end of the film, what's accomplished? What really happens? Uh, a convict, a criminal, he gets over and gets the gold, and he gets to live the life in luxury. And he helps out, a family that could use the money. But that's really about it. The cops are still corrupt, things are still fucked up, nothing really ever gets resolved, nothing ever really gets fixed. But I guess that's the whole point of things. But it's just one of those things where it's depressing, and you know what? It's a perspective I've seen done a million times before. I've seen this done before and done better, and other crime dramas with better screenplays, with better characters. Because that's another thing about this movie. There's really not anyone that you're like, yeah, I like this character, or I relate to this character, or I want this character to make it out. No, all of these characters, other than maybe some of the innocents involved, like some of the families of the characters, maybe Jennifer Carpenter's character, but I knew that she was going to die. That whole fucking sequence was pointless. Why did we need to introduce that character? What was the point of that? Oh, to shock the audience? It wasn't shocking. I'll give the film credit for showing her death in such a brutal fashion, getting her face blown off and her fingers shot off. But that's the more shocking thing, is how she died, not the fact that she died. And you're gonna have all this whole thing with this guy who's in the ski mask, and he's this absolute psychopath. I guess this guy is known as Black Gloves, maybe. I think that might be what the guy's name is. Yeah, Black Gloves, played by Primo Alon. Because these characters, they don't even have real names. They're just called Black Gloves and Gray Gloves. And the whole thing with these characters too, like these villains, like we don't there's not much to these villains. Like you never really get that much depth on them. Maybe that's the whole point. You're not supposed to really get to know them that well. But because the film is so fucking long, you kind of drift in and out, and you don't really give a shit about their subplot. So it's just one of those films where at the end of the day, yes, I've seen worse, but I've seen a lot better. And it does feel like these actors are put into a position where they aren't really able to provide a service to the best of their ability, because what they're given to work with isn't really a lot. You got Mel Gibson, and he's trying, and it's a good performance, but the character, there's really not a lot to him. He's just your average corrupt cop. Vince Vaughn, he's your naive cop who goes along with things, isn't as much of a sociopath, but he's still willing to go to those lengths. So he's still kind of a scumbag. Uh, Tory Kittles' character, Henry Johns. It seems like you're supposed to be sympathetic toward this guy in some way. Like he's an upstanding guy. Like he doesn't want his mom to be a hooker, and he wants his brother, his kid brother in a wheelchair to live a better life, and to be on the straight and narrow. And he wasn't even willing to shoot Mel Gibson's character initially at the end of the movie. He was actually going to take him by his word. So there's all this stuff that's trying to present him as being a good guy, but then you look at what he's willing to do, and you're like, he's not really a good guy. Michael J. White plays Biscuit. I mean, it's nice to see Michael J. White in like a serious acting role, but it's a completely worthless role. He has barely any screen time. He's just the buddy of Henry, and he dies. Great. Jennifer Carpenter, like I said, victim. She's just she's like that slasher film character that you know is going to die as soon as you see her face. And the rest of the cast, not much. I mean, Udo Kier as another cameo, as another character. Uh, and you got a whole bunch of other supporting cast roles that, I mean, don't really amount to much. I mean, Don Johnson is also in this as the chief and the former partner of Mel Gibson's character. But he's in it. He's in it for like one sequence, and then you never see him again. The music really forgettable. There really wasn't much in terms of a score by Jeff Harriott and S. Craig Zahler. The song choices, they were fine. They were okay. Cinematography by Benji Bashki. At times, it's too fucking dark, and the color is just sapped out to the point where the film just plays out even more dull than it already is because of how sapped out the color is. And the editing by Craig Diaria, I don't even know if I want to blame the editors for this film's flaws when it comes to its pacing and when it comes to scenes dragging on too long. Because I think it's the director who's also the writer and also one of the composers. It's S. Craig Zahler's show, and what S. Craig Zahler says goes. And he thinks everything is perfect, and he thinks he doesn't have to cut anything or trim anything down. He thinks it's tight and it's trim and it's absolute perfection. He thinks it's a masterwork and a fucking masterpiece already. Because he's full of himself. So, you're probably like, okay, we got it. You didn't like the movie. Yeah, I didn't. I thought it was boring. I thought it was way too slow paced. I thought, other than the fact that it has some solid performances by some of the cast members, uh, a few moments where it did shock me, like the victim, the hostage being the one to kill Vince Vaughn's character, some of the violence. Uh, it really didn't have a whole lot there. And yeah, so like I said, some of the direction is good, and it provides a nice gritty mood and atmosphere, and there are aspects of the screenplay that definitely make you think about how messed up society is and how it fucks over a lot of cops, and how when you think about what they do for a living, they should make more, and how it's actually willing to showcase both sides of the coin when it comes to races and race wars. Uh, okay. And it makes you really think about whether or not stealing is justified if it involves a criminal element. Like if you're stealing from criminals and drug dealers and you're taking their money and you're putting it to good use, is that really a crime? So there's some interesting discussions that are opened up at times when it comes to that kind of stuff. But it's not enough for me to say it's a brilliant, engrossing movie. It's just not. Uh, so I hope you enjoyed this rant and review. And I got nothing else to say. I'm spent. I'm gonna go down a whole bottle of water, get rehydrated, because this film, talking about this film, not only got me pretty heated, but it's a fucking heat wave over here where I'm at. So uh, I think it would be a good idea for my health to stop talking about this movie. And get myself right, so to speak, in that kind of vein. But anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.